We on? All right, let's formally reconvene the hearing, and we are now to hear from Heritage New Zealand PT. If you are there, I'm not sure whether it's Miss McCallie and also Miss Byron, or just one of you.
I'm Carolyn McCallie. I'm here. I can't see Robin on the screen. It was the intention that Robin would be joining me.
Right.
Shall I start?
Yes, just hang on a second. Have we got two on or only one online? There's only one. You're the only one online at the moment, but carry on, and if she comes through, we'll click her in.
Okay, lovely. Thank you very much. If the chair's happy, I can paraphrase my statement that I've sent through. Yeah. So paragraph 2 will just outline the matters in the summary, and paragraphs 3, 4 and 5 relate to the historical and cultural values section, which is the issue statement and the new rule and assessment criteria. Yeah. And I am comfortable with the changes made by the reporting planner in response to our submission points, and also in the submission points of other parties. Yep. And I do believe that these changes will offer an additional degree of guidance at the time of assessment for a new building on the site. In terms of paragraphs 6 and 7, in relation to the proposed rule being applied to all the scheduled heritage items, I do agree with the reporting planner that there will be some scope issues. However, I would recommend, as part of a future plan change, that this rule was included into the district plan. With regard to the agreed revised extensive place for the identified heritage sites, to date, the reporting planner has advised that these curtilages would not be marked on district plan maps, and the report would be available to guide staff and applicants at the time of assessment. I have become aware in my current role, which I've been in for 11 years, that within organisations, as staff changes, corporate knowledge does disappear. I can therefore see benefits in the suggestion from the evidence of Miss Tate Kainga-Ora, who sought that the heritage schedule is amended to explicitly make a reference to these new extensive place.
Do you want to just comment on how extensive place is managed? Afternoon, Ms. Byron. Good to see you. Yeah, do you want to just comment on the way in which extensive place is shown in other district plans in parts of the country? Because I am aware that in some cases they are shown, in some cases they're not, and the reason why they are and why they're not would be quite useful to know.
Yeah. There seems to be, and Waikato district plan recently added a lot of properties to their schedule. And what they did is the schedule is annotated. So it is the lot and DP that's shown. The extent of place is the lot and DP unless otherwise specified, was how they approached it. And then there were separate diagrams for those sort of different places, which are sometimes larger properties, and the extent of place is smaller than the lot and DP.
Would something similar satisfy you in terms of what you're seeking?
Yes, I think it would. It would make it very clear.
Thank you.
Can I just add to that, please?
Yes.
If memory serves, yesterday we heard from Mr. Marcoma that the cadastral site within the area proposed for PC9 it's provided the extended place for all the properties. I notice you've specifically referenced government gardens in some part of your evidence. Would the cadastral boundaries for the purposes of PC9 satisfy extent of place in your view?
If the extent of place matched the cadastral boundaries, and Robin, if you could refresh my memory, that was the case in most of the instances, was that right?
I believe so. I think that certainly with the 6 that were identified that that we looked at, there were, I think, in 4 cases, the extent of place was basically the cadastral boundaries of the properties. There were 2 then where there was development potential, and it was the extents of places that were proposed in the initial report that was done by Salmon Reed Architects, the medium density residential standard and heritage report. Those other 2 properties identified an extent of place that we were in agreement with.
So I just want to clear, obviously we're all concerned to do the right thing here, the best thing here. I just want to be sure that we haven't missed anything by adopting that approach. Are you aware that we need to take a different approach with any of the properties?
So I think in those 2 last instances that Ms. Byron mentioned, that a diagram would be appropriate for those.
Thank you.
And I just wanted to check with staff. I mean, at the moment, we don't have a definition of extent of place in the definition section, but I mean, that would be one obvious thing to do, would be to define it in there in terms of, as we've been talking about, that it coincides with the TP unless the plan shows otherwise. I'm aware that whilst we're dealing with 6 places now, over the course of the life of the plan, there may be others that come in, and therefore we need to anticipate that as well. So maybe staff can have a think about that and get back to us.
It does seem like a sensible approach, because it just gives some clarity. If somebody looking at the plan, it's very clear, what the boundaries are in which they have to consider what happens, within that extent of place. And of course, it doesn't preclude having, making some changes or additions or putting something within the extent of place. It just means that it gives you a level of control to be able to review and to control, to be able to make comment on what's going to happen within that extent of place.
All right, thank you.
Yep.
Next one.
So just next my paragraphs 11 to 14, I was seeking additional reference to qualifying matters, and that was extensive, in the planner, reporting planner raised concerns that this would cause confusion in the plan. In my opinion, I think there would be benefit in some guidance, but accept that this could be in a revised format from that was originally sought. There currently is a temporary note at the beginning of the residential zone chapter that states a list of qualifying matters, including archaeology, and I think this could be useful guidance to plan users. And I consider that this could be the additional reference, and place it in the introduction section just before the zone descriptions in the plan. And this is an approach that has recently been part of the planner's recommendations for the IPI variation 3 in the Waikato district plan.
Yeah. I mean, if this is the only thing that causes confusion in the plan, we'll have done a very good job.
Just moving on to paragraphs 15 and 16, where I sought that Heritage New Zealand was to be consulted for proposals adjacent to the government gardens. I still consider that this would be appropriate. The assessment criteria for the city centre zone has already identified the potential for effects on adjacent sites. I consider that given the level of significance of the government gardens, which was entered onto the list in 1994, that Heritage New Zealand would be able to provide good advice relating to its significance and heritage values. In terms of paragraph 18, we continue to be supportive of the recognition of the villages as qualifying matters and the retention of the residential 3 zoning. And I can answer any other questions that you may have.
Thank you, Ms. Kelly.
Yeah, thank you. Just a couple of questions from me. Just at your paragraph 13 in your summary statement, which mirrors the point you made in para 13, your primary evidence. I'm not quite sure what you're saying there, where the clarity and assistance is not replicated in SD, UD, P4 and P3. Both of those policies explicitly refer to historic heritage.
What I found with those is they refer to them in a different way, and they're not, well, they're certainly not identical, and one includes some and one includes other elements, and I just thought it would be helpful. And my memory is that they don't include archaeology, so I just thought it would be helpful for someone using the plan to see the whole whole list of qualifying matters in one place.
Right. And just for my benefit, is archaeology a subset of historic heritage, or is it quite distinct?
It is a subset of historic heritage, that's correct.
And just looking at the relief that you're asking for in your Appendix 1, in your summary statement, which is the same that was in your primary statement, and I'm looking at relief point 2, which is the matter of discretion for the city centre zone that you're asking for.
Yes.
And I understand your concern, as you've set out in your evidence, relates to the government gardens building.
Yes.
I guess the question I have, if it's a matter of discretion, in my mind, it's almost too late, because then there's already an application before a decision maker. They're assessing the consent application. The matters of discretion are the items they should give consideration to and potentially impose conditions in relation to. So a matter of discretion relating to consultation, it's almost too late. And I was wondering, and I'd like the staff to come back to us and reply on this, whether or not it might be appropriate to have a new performance standard in the relevant rules, such as CCZR3, that requires for building alterations or new buildings adjacent to government gardens that consultation is undertaken with yourselves and relevant iwi, but to have that as a performance standard rather than a matter of discretion. Would you be open to some kind of solution like that?
Yes, I would be, yes.
Right, and if we could just have your response and reply, that'd be helpful, thank you. And that's all I had, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
I just want to tease out the comments you made around consultation. I'm involved with a lot of consultation, and sometimes we need to be careful what we wish for. I'm just not saying that overview either way. I still think it's a fantastic way through things. I'm just curious as to your view on, with the other constraints that PC9 proposes to put in place about development adjacent to heritage sites, and then, referring back to our extended place corridor, at risk of sounding too obvious, what additional value would consultation provide that's not already provided for through your own act and other measures?
So potentially our own act is it would be only on the site. If it was to, for example, the bathhouse building or an archaeological site where someone wanted to undertake works, or the historic heritage area, by utilising the district plan, we, I guess we're asking under the Resource Management Act for something beyond the site for which it's a listing. So I guess it's in addition to what we would have from the Heritage New Zealand Act.
Okay, thank you. I mean, just thinking aloud, one of the issues that I see could arise is then adjacent, unless it's carefully defined, becomes subjective, right? So there, a significant site or wahitapa or whatever of the effect, tangibly or intangibly, is often in the eye of the beholder. So if we were of a mind to adopt that approach, we'd also need to turn our mind to some sort of constraint. To what extent would anybody need to consult? On the site.
Oh, sorry. Certainly, I was thinking it would be immediately adjacent.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. McGalley. If that's it, we'll pass over to Ms. Byron. If there's anything else, Ms. Byron, you need to tell us.
I thank you very much, the panel, and I apologize for that I was a few minutes late. When I tried to move my computer to another part of the office, it didn't want to operate, so I had to move back again. Anyway, I do apologize.
Yeah.
My evidence focused in particular on the 6 properties that were looked at in the medium density report by Salmon Reed Architects, the Heritage Report, and I made a site visit with my colleague Carolyn, and went around to look at the 6 properties. And in my view, Glenholm, Robertson House, St. Peter's Church, and Landmark Restaurant really require, in order to preserve the heritage values and the setting associated with those places, I felt that it was important that those 4 properties needed to have the whole of their property, their legal titles, entire legal titles, important to the retention of those values, and so didn't think that any intensification could happen on those 4 particular sites. Then with the cottage on Budahangi Road, it's quite a large site, and the cottage sits smack in the middle of it, quite set back from the road and without very much around it of any what would have seemed to be historic nature. And so in that case, Lloyd McCumber of Salmon Reed in his report had identified a 10-meter extent of place around the cottage, and to also have a splayed view shaft from the road that would control the height of any development that might happen in front of the cottage in order to maintain some open views of it. And I thought that was a reasonable approach. It would be, I think, it wouldn't be sensible to insist on the cottage have a sitting alone on that large site where there is, it seems to me, other development that's beginning to happen around it, and seems like an opportunity where development can happen. And then the 4th site was Guide Rangi's house, and there has already been some marae development around the house, but there are open views from the main road it seemed to me that what was being proposed in the heritage report also seemed reasonable, that the eastern part of the site could be developed with some controls on the height of anything that might go there, so it didn't overwhelm the heritage item. So as I've outlined in my summary statement, we did have a meeting between council officers, Anna Biden and Kim Smith, that included Lloyd McComber of Salmon Reed Architects, and Lloyd was amenable to revising his position in accordance with my thoughts, having made the site visits and my recommendations that were in my primary evidence. So I think unless you wanted to talk about any of the properties more specifically and my thoughts around that, because we seem to have reached a consensus agreement on these properties, I thought there's maybe not be that much to discuss, but certainly I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Byron, and that certainly echoes my thoughts. So just check to see whether there are any additional questions. And no, we don't have any, and it is good that the minds have been met, so that's always very helpful to us. Any other matters, either the two of you?
No, thank you.
No, thank you very much. Thank you very much for hearing us today. And yeah, and I'm pleased too that that we had the opportunity beforehand to have some discussions and reach agreement about those properties. It's good.
All right. Well, any questions from council? All right. Well, thank you very much for your time this afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any other matters? I'm looking. No. All right. Council, anything from council's point of view? No. All right. In that case, thank you very much, everybody. We're adjourned till tomorrow morning at 9:30. Thank you.